Hey folks, Nick here from another BookTube channel. Today, talking about apparently the worst books I've ever read. Idea from this came from Criminali did a series of videos like this where he went to his Goodreads, read, my books, whatever profile, and sorted them by average rating. And so he did three videos of like his the top books that he read, the top novels that he read, and then the worst books that he's read. I was thinking of doing something similar, but I came up against kind of a problem of redundancy with all of the best books because of my 10 best books, Brandon Sanderson basically dominated like all of them. Like even if I took out books from the same series, like all four Stormlight Archive books were like the top four. It was like one, two, three, four were all just the Stormlight Archive books, and then it was like there was like three Mistborn books. So it was just really boring. I didn't want to do a video just talking about Brandon Sanderson's high Goodreads ratings. But I did have some variety if I switched it to the bottom of the list and look at the worst books that I've read according to Goodreads. These are books that I started and finished that are rated very low. So DNFs are not counting here. These are also books that I checked all have at least 1,000 ratings because, a low volume of ratings can, kind of skews the numbers a little bit. So over 1,000, I think, is fair. And I was really surprised at these books that are in my bottom 10. Now, and again, clarifying, these are not my bottom 10. I'm not saying that these books are bad, although some of them I do think are bad. These are as Goodreads voters have voted them. And if there's anything that we know, it's that people on Goodreads are all really, really smart. I actually don't use Goodreads anymore. I use Storygraph, but I just switched over to that this year. So I was able to get, pretty much everything and use it to make this list. So I'm going to do the bottom 10 and number 10. This is the first of three books from this author that appear on this list. And this is one of my favorite authors, which is so I hate this list. It's so stupid. But it's The Beast You Are and Other Stories by Paul Tremblay. This is his most recent book, the short story collection. I have a review of this up on the channel. It's not like amazing. It's not great. And it's of his short story collections. He's got another one called Growing Things. This one is very much the weaker one. But I don't think it's got a 3.36 rating. And I don't think it deserves to be that low, like quite that low. It's not for everyone. It's got some experimental stories in there, so maybe that's why. He plays around with his stories quite a bit in this way. He does a lot of experimentation, so that probably contributed to people giving it a very low rating. I liked it. It's hit and miss, like all short story collections, but 3.36 seems really low. Number 9 is Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. This one has a 3.34 rating, and I didn't like this book that much, although I was surprised to see it ranked this low. I think an explanation for this one is that Stephen Graham Jones's writing in general can be very divisive. He has a very distinct, dense way of writing that is, again, hit and miss. For me, I really like some of his books, and then there are some of them that I struggle to connect with because of his prose. So I think that contributes to it. It could also be people read this and, like me, they didn't get what they wanted from it. So the name of the book is Night of the Mannequins. So it evokes, on purpose, I think, this idea of like a 1950s crummy sci-fi horror movie. But what it actually is just this novella about a young man who stops taking his medication and just starts systematically killing his friends. There's good stuff about it, and I've said if I read it again, I might like it more. But that first blush, I didn't care for it that much. So maybe that's why it's got such a low rating. Number 8, this is the second Paul Tremblay book, and this one makes no sense. It's The Cabin at the End of the World. It's got a 3.32 rating. And this, to me, is the perfect example of why Goodreads is garbage. Because this book is excellent. This is a fantastic book. Even though it's not my favorite Tremblay, it's probably my third favorite. This is a great book. This is a tense thriller that works really, really well. I think that the reason people voted low is because they hate the ambiguity of it, like in the ending. I feel like it's just people who are like, I need answers to every single question that's raised. And like, no, I'm not that type of reader. I like ambiguity in my horror. I like to have things a little bit open-ended. The only other thing I think is that there's a pretty surprising character death in the book that maybe people aren't expecting and they don't care for. But I think it's great. I think it's probably my favorite part of the book, honestly. So I don't get that. I don't get this one at all. Number 7, this one was also on Criminality's list. It's Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. It's got a 3.26 rating. And I really think that is too low for it. But it's got, just like Stephen Graham Jones, it has in common with that a unique writing style that probably doesn't land with everybody. I know that there was maybe a lot of hype around this book. It's kind of the book that brought Eric LaRocca to mainstream attention. So maybe mainstream horror readers were reading it, and it wasn't what they like in horror. But I thought it was pretty good. I mean, I read the edition that has and other stories in it, so it's not just that one. It's got other stuff in it as well. And I actually like maybe those stories a little bit more than Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke. Maybe that accounts for it, because I know there was also an edition which only had that first story. So maybe that accounts for it. But yeah, I don't think it deserves to be that low. Number 6 is The Reservoir by David Duchovny. This is a 3.25 rating. And this is another one. I don't see why it's that low. I'm going to say 2 reasons. The first is that it's written by a celebrity, so I think it has kind of a bias from a lot of people going into it. And not only that, it's also a book very much about COVID. And so I think the pairing of both of those things, people reading a celebrity writing about COVID, they're thinking maybe it's pretentious, or David Duchovny thinks he's smarter than everyone else. It's a very well-written novella, and I don't think it's trying to be anything more than just like an interesting kind of fever dream type story. Like it's interesting. It's an interesting book, and I recommend that. I don't think 3.25 is a good indicator of the quality of that book. I was surprised at how well written it was. Number 5, this is the third book by Paul Tremblay, and this one I agree with. This is The Pallbearers Club. This one's a 3.11, and I agree with that 100%. I actually think it could be even lower. I did not like this book at all. It's the only Paul Tremblay book I've read thus far that was a complete loss to me. I didn't connect with it in any way, didn't enjoy the characters, didn't enjoy the story, didn't get the story, like what was supposed to be spooky about it. The gimmick, I think, was underutilized. Just a misfire completely, in my opinion. So that one I agree with. Now, these next 3 books on this list, I might not have a lot to say about because I read them a very, very long time ago. So I don't remember them a lot. Especially because I didn't like any of these ones. That is, number 4 is Beautiful You by Chuck Palahniuk. It's got a 3.04. I remember hating this book. I don't like Chuck Palahniuk in general. I think Fight Club is fine, but I've tried a couple other Chuck Palahniuks. I've DNF'd them all. Don't like his writing. I think he's kind of the guy that, it's kind of like a guy that goes for shock, and there's not a lot of substance to it. I remember Beautiful You is about like this woman who is selected to basically be a test subject for a new sex toy, and the sex toy is supposed to be so powerful that it's going to allow its creator to take over the world, because all the women that use it only want to use that sex toy and do nothing else. I don't know what the book's trying to say. I don't think it was successful in saying anything, and it just wasn't funny. It wasn't interesting. It wasn't fun. So yeah, I didn't like that book. Number 3, Notes from the Internet Apocalypse by Wayne Gladstone. It's got a 3.01 rating. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I don't remember a damn thing about this book. I couldn't tell you a plot synopsis. I couldn't tell you a character. I couldn't tell you a thing about it. So that probably tells you all you need to know about its quality. Probably belongs where it is. Number 2, this is another one. I don't remember anything about it. That's The Children's Home by Charles Lambert. It's got a 2.92 rating. The only thing I remember about this book is how and why I read it. I was working at Barnes & Noble at the time, and the ARC copy of this came in, and I was just kind of the first one to grab it. The cover looked like, this might be interesting. It wasn't, and I remember nothing about the story or really why I didn't like it. I just remember it being not good. So that probably belongs here. And then number 1, the worst book I've read according to Goodreads, and I'm inclined to agree. I don't disagree with having this be so low. I don't know if it's the worst ever, not looking at the rest of my list, but I certainly hated it. And that's Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. I also think this was Criminality's number 1 book now that I think about it. It's got a 2.67 rating. I hated this book. I hated it. I think it read like somebody trying to write Shirley Jackson's Haunting of Hill House, but doing so in the most pretentious way possible. Just like open up the thesaurus, just use every synonym you could find, pad out all of the adjectives and adverbs and everything that they teach you in your English lit course, in your master's courses. Just fill it with language that is completely highfalutin and annoying and tedious and damn pretentious. I hated this book. The only reason I even finished it was because it was so short. I thought maybe the story would redeem it. It didn't. It was horrible. I hated this book. I know a lot of people dig Cassandra Khaw's writing style. She had a new book, I can't remember the name of it, that came out last year that did reasonably well, although I think she co-wrote that with somebody else. But I have no desire to read that. This book completely put me off of her work. I will never read another Cassandra Khaw because this book was so grating. And I've said it all. I hated it. So yeah, those are my top 10 or bottom 10 worst books that I've read according to Goodreads. I think Goodreads is, like I said before, not a very good website. You can't trust a lot of these readers who they'll put 1 star on anything. There's not a lot of honest opinions being given or critical thinking there. I'm sure there's plenty of ones that are good, but it's too unreliable. So make sure you stick around and you find booktubers that you know and trust who share your taste, because that's really the best way to understand whether you'll like a book or not. Find someone you know who shares your taste, and if they liked it, maybe you'll like it, and if they didn't, then maybe you won't. That's my advice for you. Let me know what your worst book is according to Goodreads or Storygraph or whatever you use. Thank you very much for spending some time with me today, but now, time to get back to reading.